Oh, what a mess.
This is Neil Schneider from Meant to Be Seen. Welcome back to my messy basement. So just to catch you up a little bit, even though my messy basement has been around for some time, I'm actually working on a kind of a subset of programs all about turning the PC into the ultimate media / entertainment system. Okay, so the ultimate system for games, the ultimate system for movie watching, the ultimate system for streaming, you name it. I want the PC to be the core of all of it. Now, more than this though, I'm very budget conscious, okay? I have a beautiful 1080p 3D projector, a Panasonic AE7000 projector, and for reasons I've described earlier on in this series, I'm really not ready to upgrade to a 4K projector just yet. The value proposition, at least for me, isn't high enough yet, to justify upgrading all the equipment. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that, all the entertainment I want to enjoy works on my existing display equipment. I'll take it another step. I am really excited about Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, the latest generations of surround sound technologies. So even though I'm using an 1080p or an older display, and by the way, 1080p is still very much active in the projector market for other reasons, I want to still be able to enjoy Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. And unfortunately, a lot of content that we take for granted does not support those 1080p displays. So you could have a capable surround sound system, but if you don't have the 4K display to go with it, you're not going to benefit from those really exciting audio experiences. So I want to enable that. I want to see that happen no matter what display I'm running my equipment on. And I'm a budget conscious person. Okay, so even though I want the PC to be the ultimate entertainment, media system, the real core to my basement here, I'd like to enable this on a reasonable budget. I'd like to avoid, too many upgrades, if you will. So this is our progress so far. Okay, so I've been working on this for a few episodes now. So early on, we had a really good snapshot of our ecosystem as it is today. All of the big challenges. It's worth watching, to see what got me to this point. We learned how to downscale 4K content to 1080p. So, why would you want to do that? I mean, there's a lot of content out there that's, 1080p already. Why would you want to take 4K content and turn it to 1080p? Well, the reason is that when you take 4K content and downscale it, it could actually look better than just taking plain 1080p content on its own. So we did a program about how to do it and some devices on the market that let you do that very affordably. So that's well worth watching as well. We did a product review for the Onkyo TX-NR595 surround sound Dolby Atmos DTS:X receiver. And yes, I think it's good to have a product review, but what I think really came out of it is that I think there was a clearer understanding of the kinds of things to look out for a surround sound system, as well as the speakers that you're going to use to support it. So I think that ended up being a helpful review. We did a review of the Creative Lab Sound Blaster X3 sound card, and that's helpful if you don't have speakers and you want to use headphones. They have some new super XFI technology so that surround sound can be enabled in a different way through your headphones. So we looked at that as well. And now we're moving forward into the next stage, which is really, I think, is really innovative stuff, which is taking 4K Blu-rays, okay, which are coded in high dynamic range, and getting them to run on 1080p, standard dynamic range projectors and displays. So that's no small feat. So we're going to talk about that, as well as making it possible for them to run using the latest Dolby Atmos and DTS:X technologies. Okay, this is something that would normally be difficult to do. We're also going to look, and this is something I'm very excited about, is how to enable streaming services through your PC at the highest resolutions, like at the full capability of your system, and also benefit from Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. So I'm really excited about this. I've been working. The reason why these programs are so spread far apart is I've actually been doing a little bit of a personal journey. It's a hobby, really, a personal journey to how to best enable this. And I'm bringing all this information to you so that you don't have to wait months. You could get it all done, based on some ideas I have to share with you. And I think that based on some of the things I discovered along the way, perhaps some doors have been opened that we can do even more than we originally planned for. So that's something we could talk about a little bit later. So before we go into talking about Blu-rays and streaming and all that stuff, we're going to do that in a future episode because I think it's very important that with our display equipment, with our audio equipment, that it's actually properly set up so that it looks and sounds its best. So we're in episode 40 of Neil's Messy Basement. We're in a new year, 2021, thank goodness. So the whole focus of this episode is going to be about calibrating our audio, calibrating our video so it looks and sounds great. And it's all going to be in this one episode. So if you need to have one reference to get it done, this is that episode. And I'm sure there's other tweaks, other ideas beyond this, but I'm going to share with you my experience, and I'm hoping you're going to be happy with the results you experience out of your display and audio equipment when this program is complete. And then we're going to continue our journey to enabling the ultimate PC media entertainment experience. So we'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to the basement. I'm Neil Schneider. Let's get started with figuring out how do we go about calibrating our surround sound system. So what do I mean by surround sound? Well, I'm actually sitting in a surround sound environment right now. The most basic surround sound is called 5.1. So we have 3 speakers in the front, 2 speakers behind, and we have a subwoofer. So that's the 0.1. But you can get really elaborate surround sound systems with like you get upwards of like 11 channels if you wanted. There's all kinds of setups available for consumers if you're willing to pay for it. In this case, I'm taking advantage of a 5.1.2 setup. So what's happening here is I've got 3 speakers in the front, 2 in the back, plus 2 front high speakers for Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. And of course I have the subwoofer as well. And you could get a little more elaborate than that, as I mentioned before. The guide or the method of calibration I'm going to share with you today can be applied to all these surround sound systems. It's not limited to any one specific system. So why should we bother with this calibration? Okay. Well, first off, if we're taking advantage of a surround sound system, we're hearing different audio cues from different things behind you, things in front of you, and when your system is well calibrated, those audio cues should actually be a bit more effective. Okay, so you'll really hear where things are coming from, and I think it adds a lot of fun to the entertainment experience. Also, when our audio system is well balanced, everything is very natural sounding. it doesn't sound divided in the room. It actually sounds very seamless, very smooth as things move from one part of the room to the next, like, you know, audio positioning, I mean. The speaker system, of course, will be balanced, okay? So, you know, the audio volumes are approximately equal between the different speakers. And something very important is the subwoofer. So the subwoofer is responsible for those deep bass sounds, those booming audio. And the thing is, it's very important that it works in tandem with the speakers and it's not divided, okay? So I'm trying to express this as best I can. So if you're watching a movie or you're listening to music and everything sounds like really boomy, or the subwoofer sounds disjointed, it's because it's not calibrated properly. And it's important to do it, the better the calibration, of course, the better your audio will sound. So this is what you're going to need you know, to do this calibration well. Now keep in mind, I know many surround sound systems have their own calibration microphones and their own techniques, and we're going to touch on that too. But what I'm sharing with you today, I think, is going to be better than what your surround sound system can do on its own. And I think that if your results are similar to mine, you're going to be very happy with it. So first, what are you going to need? Well, this is a you know, pretty honking tripod, but any standard camera tripod will do. You don't need anything fancy, as long as it has like the standard, you know, screw connector for a camera. Again, very standard camera tripod. Anything will do. Next, this is very important. You're going to need a C-weighted sound level meter. So there's different types of, they call it weighting for a sound level meter. It's very important that it's C, the letter C, because C-level weighting means that the sound meter is designed to measure audio according to the capabilities of the human ear. So if you go with a different type of weighting for a sound level meter, it won't have any relevance. You won't be able, it won't be useful at all for calibrating your surround sound system. So this is very important. Now, something to be aware of, you don't have to buy an expensive sound level meter at all. I mean, there are pricey ones, and they're probably extremely accurate, but that's actually very, in my opinion, it's very unimportant for our needs. All that matters is that when the sound level meter is reading its audio, it's somewhat consistent. So the way it reads, you know, the audio level of one speaker will be the same way it reads the audio level of another speaker. We're only interested in consistency more so than precise accuracy. So as for my recommendation for a sound level meter, you know, I found this on Amazon. It's a Teco Plus SLM24. This is, I was able to get it from Amazon Canada. I found the equivalent in the US under model name SLM25TK. Okay, of course it's a C-weighted sound level meter. Something I really like, and I found that it is available with other sound level meters, it's not unique to this one, is it has a max button. And what a max button does is it takes note of the highest decibel reading. Okay, so basically the highest volume reading that it picked up at a given time. Okay, so, and I'm going to explain why that's so important a little later in this guide, but it's a very helpful feature when it comes to getting that consistency between your speakers. And as I mentioned earlier, a sound level meter you know, should not be an expensive purchase for this purpose. This one was all of $40 in US, and there are others. Maybe you could find one a little more inexpensive, but nonetheless, I've been very happy with this one. So let's talk a little bit about how to set up your speakers. Okay, so the first step is in your surround sound system setup, you need to determine the crossover frequency. So the crossover frequencies refers to, you know, at what range of audio are the speakers responsible for. So so in this case, just to simplify it, what you should do is, unless you've got satellite speakers, which are those tiny speakers, you have instead, let's say, bookshelf speakers or tower speakers, my recommendation is to set their lowest frequency to 80 hertz. Now, this is something to be aware of. A lot of companies, like let's say for tower speakers, for example, these are tower speakers, they may market themselves as being capable of having audio at as low as 40 hertz, maybe even a touch lower. Well, just be aware that even though they may market themselves as being able to put out audio at those lower frequencies, it's very unlikely that they will be able to perform as well as a subwoofer, which is really designed for those lower frequencies. So it's actually wiser. It's a common recommendation is that set it to 80 hertz, and even though these speakers are not putting out audio at those lower frequencies, it means that they can actually perform a little bit better at the higher frequencies, that they have a little more headroom to put out better audio. So again, if you're dealing with bookshelf speakers or tower speakers, often they're called full range speakers, set it for an 80 hertz crossover setting. The exception to the rule would be if you're dealing with these, tiny satellite speakers. These are like home theater in a box speakers, and the speakers are like little cubes that you put on your wall. They could put out pretty good audio. I mean, I've used them in the past, but their performance may not be the same, or are unlikely to be the same as what you'd get through bookshelf speakers or tower speakers. So in that case, instead of starting at a lower rate of 80 hertz, you may want to start them up at 100 hertz, okay? Check with the manufacturer as to what they recommend. They'll have recommendations for that. As for the subwoofer, okay, you want to get its crossover set at 120 hertz. So that means that the subwoofer will start to be responsible for audio from 120 hertz and below, okay? So easy enough. As far as the speaker positioning, okay, it's really up to your personal tastes and also to what the manufacturer recommends. So in this case, based on the manufacturer recommendation and also based on what I'm hearing, these particular speakers do a bit better when you toe them in, when you angle them in toward the listener. If you don't do that, you don't hear all the frequencies that the speaker's designed to put out. In fact, I did the same where I have special, wall anchors, and I'm able to angle the speakers at precisely where I want them to go. So this will not have, well, in a way, it does. So yeah, get it well positioned. Okay, that's key. All right. So and just refer to your manufacturer's manual as to whether they recommend angling and so on. Now, for your subwoofer, okay. Nowadays, they tend to be self-powered, which means that you plug them in and they power themselves up. It used to be that the subwoofers were powered by the actual receiver, not anymore. Now they have their own power supplies. So you have to check with your manual as to what they recommend the startup is. I'm going by memory, but I think in this case, I'm using a Polk PSW10, and I think they recommend upwards of a quarter of the volume to perhaps half. I think it's a quarter. You want to be above the hum. There's a point where it's got to be at a threshold where you're not hearing a hum coming out of the subwoofer. But anyway, check your manual. It will give a recommendation as to where to start from. So let's talk about the actual calibration. So first off, set up your tripod, okay, to the exact spot, or the most likely spot, you're going to be listening to your audio from. So if there's a chair or a couch, you could do one of two things. You can either move the chair or put the tripod down, or what I've done is I've put the tripod literally on the chair. What's most important is not only just the position of it, but the top of the tripod should be at ear level. Okay, we're trying to simulate exactly where you're going to be and how tall your ear is going to be, so we're getting an accurate measure. And of course, I know this may seem obvious, but I've had some tests get thrown off by this. It's important to keep the room as quiet as possible. Now, what you're going to want to do is, most modern surround sound systems have their own testing microphone. Okay, and what you do is they're usually designed that you could screw them onto the tripod, so put it on, and run through the calibration process that your surround sound system recommends. So why is this important? Because we're going to be doing a further calibration. Why should we bother with this? Well, it's not just about having the speakers at the correct volume. Another important factor is getting a measure of where the speakers are compared to where the user is. And the reason that is when audio is being broadcast through the speakers, especially in a surround sound setup, there could be little minor delays to account for distance, so that when the audio is striking your ears, it's doing so at the right instant. So there's a reasoning for this. So when you go through the calibration, you're going to get a very accurate representation, or at least you should get a very accurate representation of how far the speakers are, so that the surround sound system can do the correct calculations. Okay, so you're going to go through that. You're going to go through the setup. You're going to get it finished up. So now, what do we want to do? Well, in your surround sound system, you should have like a speaker level screen. Okay, and what this does is it will put out a test tone, and you could go through the different speakers to get to hear how the speakers sound compared to one another. And it's like this white noise. It's like shh. That's usually what it sounds like. So what you need to do is go to the speaker level screen, and you pick your first speaker. Usually it's the front left speaker. Okay, whatever speaker it is, pick one. And what you need to do is put the sound level meter, okay, on the tripod, again at ear level, where you're going to be ultimately seated when you're watching your entertainment, just as we did before, except you're using the sound level meter. Okay, fantastic. So what we're going to be doing, okay, as we're going through this test, do you remember I mentioned this max button on the meter? Well, what's going to happen is, as the speakers are going through this white noise test, we're going to be looking at where the consistency is from one speaker to the next, and adjust each speaker accordingly, so that when the test is complete, all the speakers are precisely at the same volume level. So this is what we're going to do. Let's go through the steps. So as I mentioned, we're going to get this on the tripod. We're going to put it precisely, where we're going to be seated at ear level. What we need to do with this is we need to put it on C weighting. Again, so we want this picking up audio according to the range that the human ear is capable of. My recommendation in this case, and I think it's a consistent thing, is you have a choice between having the readings or the decibel readings coming in very fast or very slow. My recommendation is to go with very fast, okay? Because the next step is we're going to press the max button, and what we want to do is we want to find out what the highest point is as quickly as possible. Okay? So remember, we got the white noise generator going on. We have the first speaker putting out this white noise sound. What I'd like you to do now is increase the volume from your surround sound system. Just turn up the volume, and you want this to read approximately 80 decibels. Okay? It could be a little bit off. I mean, maybe you'll get close. Maybe you'll get 80.1 or 79.9. That's fine. but you're again, so you're going to press the max button, so it's always highlighting the the loudest decibel it has on record, and turn it up until it reads approximately 80. And keep note of what that number is. So let's say we get it on the nose, it's 80 decibels. So that's the volume we want all the speakers to achieve. So what we'll do is, so what I like to do is, as the white noise is coming in, you press the max button, you press it again, so it resets, and you get a double check of, oh yeah, consistently. You got to wait for it a little bit, just to make sure it's picked up that highest value, but it should be 80. So you hit 80, you're happy with it, fine. Then you move to your next speaker. So in the case of the next speaker, maybe because of its distance to the sound meter, maybe it's a little louder, maybe it's a little softer. So what you do is there's a trim feature, so where you can make each individual speaker a little louder, a little softer. And what you want to do, again, you're going to have to go a little bit by taste, okay? But you press the max button just to so it's like it knows to kind of reset and get a fresh reading. And again, you want to see if you can get that high point of 80 on the nose, or whatever decibel you decided on. So again, you go speaker to speaker. Once you've done all the speakers, okay, the next step is the subwoofer. The subwoofer is a little bit different because it really, first off, because the frequencies are so low, it sounds very different from the other speakers. So it may not actually sound as loud as the other speakers, but it actually is. And the reason that's the case is the frequencies are so low, and it also depends on what your ears are capable of hearing. Now, my recommendation is, instead of doing the audio adjustments from the surround sound system of making it louder and softer with the subwoofer, my recommendation is, if the subwoofer has its own volume control, adjust the volume directly on the subwoofer. Try to get it as close as possible. And then, once you've done that, then do the trim on the surround sound system, where you make it a little lower or higher until you can get as close to that 80 decibels as possible. Now, if for whatever reason you have a sound level meter that is C weighted, okay, so that's fine. But if you don't have a max button, and therefore you can't use that as your point of consistency, your next option is, if you can choose, make it so that it puts out slow readings. Remember, before we set it to put out those readings very quickly, set it up for a slow readout, so you could track the numbers, for yourself, okay? And try to identify that middle point, okay? So it's going to read like, it may read like 78 decibels, 79.5, 81.2, whatever it is. And you're just going to have to judge for yourself what that middle of the road point is. And you're going to get this, and just as we did before, going speaker to speaker, you're going to do your best, okay, to get the speakers as consistent as possible from one point to the next. Now, I've gone through both methods, and it's not that hard. You'll actually get it very, very close, whether or not you have that max button capability. But just so you know, if you're buying a sound level meter for the first time, look for that max button. It really does make things a lot easier. So when you're complete, when you've gone through all the speakers, what you can do is you could just go through that white noise generator, or the sound level page on your surround sound system, and go from one speaker to the next, sitting in the position where you're going to be listening to the audio. And if you close your eyes, even if the speakers are in different spots in the room, it's going to sound that they're almost literally at the same volume level, no matter how close or how far they are away from you. And I really think that where it's going to be really pronounced, or one of the biggest benefits, is when you're watching movies or you're playing games. That subwoofer, it's going to definitely be working. You're going to hear that thunder, and you're going to hear the explosions and all that stuff. But everything's going to be like naturally boomy. It's like it's explosive, I should say, not boomy. Okay, so it's going to sound really good, and you're going to hear where things are coming from, and things are going to be balanced, and things are going to be seamless right around you. This was a really a worthwhile purchase, and just keep note of your settings, and if something happens, you could always do a fresh calibration. So this is a very useful process. So that being said, let's move on to video right after this. So we've got a beautiful sounding surround sound system. Now we've got to get our displays equally beautiful. So what are we after? Well, when we're talking about displays like HDTVs or computer monitors, or in this case a cinema projector, we're talking about a spectrum between black and white. Okay, so black would mean like as dark and as black as possible, and white is as clean, pristine white. But what we want to achieve is not just black, not just white. There's this whole range of gray in between. And we want to see all the different steps that get from black to white, all the variations of gray. Now, what we want to avoid, however, is what we call either black crush or white crush. Okay? So an example of black crush is, or actually what a crush would be, is if we were looking at those steps of black, gray, white, we'd be missing steps. So so if we were looking at the black section, instead of seeing black, super dark gray, gray, and then variations of white, we'd see this big chunk of black, and we wouldn't see any variations in that black, and then suddenly we'd see some steps of gray. And similar in the white area, we'd see black, gray, and then suddenly a big chunk of white, and all these missing steps, not enough variation. So why should we care so much? Well, if we're watching a movie and there's a dark scene, maybe we'll see the actors, but maybe we won't see the intricate stuff going on behind the actors. Maybe there's stuff going on in the shadows that we're missing out on because we're not seeing all the variations of those deep blacks. Or on the other side of the equation, if we're talking about the white areas, in those bright spots of the image, maybe we're not seeing all the clouds. Maybe the screen looks a little powdery. It doesn't look quite as vibrant. Okay. And a lot of this is caused by, again, what we call black crush and white crush. So we want to see as many of those variations as our equipment is capable of. So before we talk about calibration, and well, we kind of know why it's important, but why it's so important is we really need to acknowledge why HDTVs, and when I'm talking HDTVs, I'm also including computer monitors and projectors, are so different. Okay, so HDTV, and when I'm talking HDTV, I'm talking OLED, I'm talking LCD technologies. They're not really made anymore, but plasma technologies. They have some big advantages. Okay, they've got very clean pixel definition because the light is projected outwards rather than towards it. You can have them in all kinds of environments, and they're pretty consistent. Unless the room is unusually bright, it's pretty easy to get a vibrant image off an HDTV or a computer display. On the other hand, if you're dealing with a projector, and and a projector is, as you can see for yourself, the light is being literally projected onto a surface. There's a lot more variables at stake. I mean, first off, different projectors put out different amounts of light rated in lumens. The distance from the projector could have an effect on the image quality. The size of the screen relative to where the projector is positioned could influence the image quality. Unlike HDTVs and computer displays, it's harder for a projector to achieve deep black levels. So, as a comparison, an HDTV, if you're dealing with OLED, for example, they just turn the pixel off, no light coming out whatsoever. A projector, on the other hand, it can't really project black. How do you project black? The most a projector can do is to maybe block the light, so less light is hitting the screen, and it's kind of like a very, very dark gray black, but not a pure black that you would get with an OLED or an HDTV. So that's a bit of a challenge for a projector. Also, projectors are sensitive, to the ambient light in the room. You just have a computer screen on in the corner of a room, and this could actually have an influence on your cinema image. Even what you're projecting on could have an influence on how what your image looks like. So why go through all this trouble? It sounds like HDTV or panels are the way to go. Well, they actually are. The competition has definitely tightened between the two media, that's for sure. However, projector still wins on size. I mean, I don't think I could afford to have this size image, at least not yet, in an LCD or in a display panel form. So projection still wins for me. So going back to the topic of calibration, everything I'm sharing with you today could very much apply to an HDTV or to a display monitor, but I really think it's going to have more relevance if you're using a projector, because there's more variables at work affecting the image, and for those reasons, this calibration should be helpful. So step one, and I learned this the hard way very late in the game, is you actually should start with having the projector properly mounted. Okay, and again, I did this. I've been doing it wrong for too long, but I finally figured out. So there's two types of projectors. Okay, or actually, I shouldn't say there's two types of projectors. There's two types of ways that a projector can be adjusted to be well fit on a screen like this. So you notice that it's perfectly flush. There's no weird angles. It's really very clean. So the first method is, if you're using a more inexpensive projector, what you do is you get the projector mounted either on a table or on the ceiling. You point it as you try to get a position as straight in front of the screen as you can. What will happen is your screen may have little angles on the side, like a trapezoid angle or different shapes. And what you do is, on the projector, you use a technique called keystoning. And what it does is it adjusts the pixels so that those angles straighten out, and you get that flush. So what you want to do again is, when you get your projector mounted, you want it to get as close to center as you can to the screen. You want to avoid tilting as much as possible. Okay, so the more central to the screen, the better. And then again, when you have those imperfections of those trapezoid shapes and whatnot, using the projector's keystoning adjustments, you can straighten things out. The catch is, once you start using keystoning adjustments, it does have a bit of an effect on the quality of the image, because you're manipulating the pixels, you're not quite getting the same resolution because there's different compensations going on. You might see some minor artifacts. You'd really you try to avoid it if you can. You do the best you can, but usually you'll end up doing some keystoning. If, on the other hand, you have a projector that has lens shift, which I'm thankful I have, you can do a lot better. So what lens shift does is this. Imagine you have a projector. Okay, it's facing straight, however it's faced. Behind the lens of the projector is an apparatus. And what you can do with lens shift is you can move the apparatus inside the projector so that the image is directly pointed where you need it to go without any other manipulations or adjustments like keystoning. So the way to do it with a lens shift projector like this one is again, you really want to be as center as possible. Get the projector as centered as possible. Have it face the wall or the screen at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so straightforward, no tilts. Do everything you can to avoid tilting the projector in any direction. Just 90 degrees. Now, what you're going to see is the image is obviously not going to be on the screen, or at least it's not going to be perfectly on the screen. That's fine. Zoom it out to approximately the size of the screen you're going to be using. And what you do is, without moving the projector physically, you use the lens shift feature of the projector, and you get it centered on the screen. Okay? So if you have it properly zoomed from the projector, so you zoom it to the full size of the screen, you use the lens shift to manipulate it as best you can, it should be perfectly flush with the screen like this. No angles, no distortions, perfect. And then only as a last resort, if you need to do little adjustments, you could do some keystoning. But again, if your projector has enough flexibility with its lens shift, if you're lucky, you won't have to do any keystoning at all. So that's a real innovation. If you could spend a few extra dollars on a projector that has lens shift, I strongly recommend it. Now, thinking back at my early elementary school days, every time the teacher would show something on the projector, the kids would yell out, "Focus, focus, focus." Well, this is same with the projector. So in my opinion, you could do it one of two ways. One way is you zoom it out like it is and you do your best to focus it, and it works. That's how I did it before, but I think that actually may be the wrong technique. What I found works best is I zoom out, make the image as small as possible on the screen. I get it perfectly focused, and then I zoom it up to the full-size screen, and it's sharp as nails. Okay, so again, maybe you start off the full image, so you have the projector well positioned, sized perfectly. You zoom out, you make it small, get it tightly focused, then you zoom back into full screen, and it's a perfectly sharp picture, and hopefully you never have to adjust it again. Just don't touch the projector. So let's talk. Wow, you've been patient with me. Okay, so let's talk about that calibration. All right, so we want to get, going back to, that scale of going from the deep blacks to the pristine whites and getting all the steps of gray in between. This is how we're going to go about doing it. So first, make sure your room is as dark as possible. Okay, it's good to do it at night. All right, even if you're in a basement like this, you really want to avoid any extra light in the room. In your projector settings, make sure everything is set to default. So in my case, usually a projector could have different modes, like a normal mode and a cinema mode and all kinds of stuff. I recommend starting with the default mode. Usually it's normal mode. Okay, you can experiment with others later on, but start with normal mode. There's a feature in many projectors now called an iris. And you want to turn this off, just for calibration purposes. It's temporary. Once everything's set up, you can turn it back on. What the iris does is, as light is coming out of the projector, it has, as I said, an iris that kind of limits how much light is putting out, and it dynamically adjusts the iris, just like your eye, according to what is being shown on the screen. And the reason it does this is it adjusts, so like if it's a dark scene and it's less light is coming out of the projector, it means it could show more levels of contrast. Okay, so it's a feature, most projectors have it. It makes makes a helpful difference for different types of contrast and dark scenes and stuff. So, but again, turn it off because that could influence our calibration. So it's temporary. Just turn it off for now. Now, the first thing we're going to adjust is the brightness of the projector. So when we're talking about brightness, when we're talking about projection or HDTVs or whatever display we're using, we're actually not talking about the amount of light that it's putting out. We're adjusting the point of its darkest black level. Okay, because what happens is when we find the point where it's its darkest black level, it's from that point that things scale up, okay, to that pristine white. Okay, so we want to figure out where is that starting point for that perfect black. So if we were to look at that scale and you were to adjust the brightness control, it would primarily only, well, it would affect other parts of it, but mainly would affect the black parts or the really dark parts of the scale. So now, when we're talking about contrast, it's the opposite. So contrast, we're looking at taking into account the differences between the different steps from going black all the way to pristine white. And the thing is, when you adjust the contrast, you're going to see the adjustments really on the bright, using the wrong word, bright, on the white side of the scale. Okay, so you're going to primarily see it on the last few steps of the scale. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So again, so brightness, we're controlling if you want, the black levels, and then contrast, we're dealing primarily with the white levels, okay, of the image. So the first step, let's get the brightness under control. My recommendation is if you're dealing with a 1080p projector or whatever resolution projector it is, get a full screen black image, pure black, as black as can be. Okay, get it on your projector screen, make it the only thing on the screen. With your brightness control, you may actually have to raise if it's already too. I'll explain in a moment. But what you want to do is, with your brightness control, you want to get it as black as possible. So look very carefully as you lower it. Find that point where it just can't get any more black. Okay, that's the only way I can put it. Find that perfectly black spot. 1 shade, 2 shades, whatever it is, just find it. You may find that if you have a projector and it defaults, let's say there's a neutral point of 0, and you could go -1, -2, -3, or +1, +2, +3, whatever it is, it's possible that your black level is above 0. It's better, if that's the case, you may increase the brightness. You may have it set at a black level lower than what your projector is capable of. So if you find that your true black happens a few steps above the neutral point, set it a few steps above the neutral point. Go by your eye. Again, look at the full black screen. Make sure, find that shade that's just the perfect black. Okay, that's going to be your brightness setting. Next, let's look at, I recommend these contrast bars. I have it linked. Okay, get this full screen on your projector image. Now, what I want you to do is look at the last 2 bars on the white side. Okay. What we want to do is we want to get the last bar as white as possible, okay, as pristine white as possible. And then the adjacent bar, okay, which is kind of like an off-white or a shade of gray, we wanted it to get to the darkest point it could be without making that white bar next to it any darker. Okay? So what you do is you adjust the contrast. And again, you're looking at that gray bar, that's that off-white bar, if you will. You try and get it darker, darker, and then if you see the slightest impact to that last white bar, you got to stop. Okay? So what should happen is if your projector is well adjusted, you're going to see, you know, from black all the steps leading up to that pristine white. But again, you want that, when adjusting the contrast, you want that pristine white to stay as white as possible while getting that, you know, the darkest shade possible on its adjacent bar. So final adjustment, go back to that full, you know, full screen black image, go back to your brightness control and double check. Make sure that it is still the blackest image, the darkest, blackest image you can get on your projector. If it is, you know, if you have to adjust, go back again to those bars, you know, readjust as necessary. Okay, it should be very, very close. When you are complete, you should be able to again distinguish from the deepest black. Maybe, if you know, depending on your projector and your setup, maybe you're going to be able to see like a slight difference of a bar adjacent to that black, and then you're going to see, you know, shades of gray leading right up to the last pristine white bar. There could be some differences depending on the quality of your display or your projector, so you're going to do the best you can with the equipment that you have. But you know, when you're complete, in my, you know, if this works out as planned, when you watch your movies and your games and your entertainment, it's going to be a nice bright image, and you're not going to see any of that black crush or white crush. There are other things you can try with your projector to get it, you know, things that you can experiment with. So many projectors have an eco mode, and the idea behind eco mode is instead of using the full brightness of the projector, it puts out, you know, it lowers the power of the bulb. Well, one of the benefits of doing that is you can actually get more contrast out of the projector. It's actually when the projector has less light to, if you will, block, you know, to show off that black or those dark images to the screen, it actually makes it easier for the projector to show off those differences of black to gray to white. In fact, if you go through the different modes on your projector, which I encourage you to try, you're going to find that they too reduce the amount of light output from the projector so that you can get more distinctions of contrast. So try it, experiment with it. And you know, something to think about as well is if your projector is close enough to the screen, you know, maybe it doesn't have to be so bright, right? I mean, that's one of the advantages of having a projector, you know, closer to the screen versus further away. Now, there are all kinds of other settings, you know, you could play with, like tint, color temperature. In my experience, in my experience, the manufacturers are pretty good with this out of the gate. 90% of the calibration really has to do with brightness and contrast, as I described before. But you can experiment with these other settings too and find what's right for you and your equipment. Was that a calibration or what? Welcome to 2021. Happy New Year, a recalibration for the year. So if you've done all the steps, if everything worked out as I hope it worked out for you, you're going to have a beautiful image. Everything is going to sound amazing, And now we're ready to take on the next steps. And the next steps, 4K Blu-ray, streaming audio with Dolby Atmos, some ideas that I discovered along the way. I'm really excited to sharing this journey with you. We are going to be back again soon. We'll talk again. Thank you for watching.